What we're going to talk about today is need exploration. This is a critical element in any conflict resolution scenario. It's going to be a skill set that's very important in terms of reaching resolution. However, it's often a skill set that's overlooked. Oftentimes in this culture, we end up being excellent problem solvers and lousy need assessors. In fact, we train our managers, supervisors, teachers into a problem-solving model that, as a result, can often cause more problems than the solutions they're trying to originate or create. For example, in the communication presentation, we talked about people working out of a balance between the emotions and the intellect. Okay? That's where we want people making decisions. But in a conflict situation, communication changes, and they end up pushing something out. It's an imbalanced state that they're in. Either the emotions get pushed out, they become very rational and intellectual, or the intellect get pushes out, and they become very emotional. Either way, we don't want people making a decision in this imbalanced state. Well, most problem-solving models are designed to affect speed, a speedy solution, get them back on the workplace floor, get these people working, we're losing productivity, we're losing time, we're losing money. And the speed creates decisions out of imbalance that can produce frustration when they get back in balance. Say the next day, or the next hour, or a couple of hours later. They find out that they're back in a balanced state, they're more coherent, and now they're evaluating. Sometimes they can feel manipulated, they can feel railroaded, they can feel as though this whole thing was set up to someone else's advantage, and they become unsatisfied with the solution that was made in an imbalanced state. So rather than problem-solving model, what you're going to see here today is we're going to talk about need exploration. Now, need exploration needs to be done whether it's in a mediation setting or any conflict resolution setting. We'll create that. So that's going to be a skill set you're going to use almost anywhere. But what we're going to focus on, again, is the mediation table and what we're doing here. So let's look at a definition. Definition of mediation we have is to empower people to make an informed decision in their own best interest. Now, what we're going to focus on during this presentation is their own best interest. That's what we're headed for. We want people making decisions in a balanced state. Therefore, if necessary, we want to allow a venting process to take place in order to release this pressure that's created here so that they can be back into a balanced state. So we have to do something at this table with our skill set, with our communication, with need exploration in order to create that balance, create an informed decision in their own best interest. So what's going on at this table then? First thing that's happening is there's a singular solution taking place. The person comes in with their idea of what will resolve this. And often that's one single solution. Based upon their understanding of what's happened, they've concluded that here's what needs to be done. Here's what I want to see happen. So the reason there's a conflict isn't the lack of solutions. In fact, the reason we have a conflict is there's too many solutions at the table. In fact, conflict is the result of not the lack of a solution, but we have two different solutions that neither party can agree on. Now, in a problem-solving model, as a supervisor or manager, if I walk into this situation and I assess it and do an evaluation and get information, and then I offer another solution, now we've got three solutions. So it's headed in the wrong direction in terms of a problem-solving model. Something else needs to take place in order to move out of a single solution mindset, and that something else is need exploration. Let me give you an example. Fisher and Urey wrote a book called Getting to Yes, and in that book on negotiation, they talk about the orange story. The orange story works like this. You have one orange, two kids, conflict. What do you do? That's right. Cut the orange in half. It's usually the answer that's given most often. What happened in the real life situation was the one child peeled the orange, threw the inside away, used the peel for a science project, while the other child peeled it, ate the inside, and threw the peel away. So the unexpected response was that the peel was more important to the one child than to the other. That's an excellent illustration of how we become easier problem solvers. I propose a problem to you. We've got one orange, limited resources, and we've got two people who want the orange. What do? We cut it in half. The assumption that we came to the solution with was that they both wanted to eat it. Rather than doing need exploration, we slip into a problem-solving mode. Problem solved. We'll just cut it in half. You get half, you get half. But notice, the child who wanted the peel could have gotten the whole peel. Their need would have been met by getting the whole peel. The other child who wanted to eat it could have gotten the whole inside. His need would have been met. What was missing was need exploration. What question could we have asked the children, either one of them or both, that would have begun to identify their need? Well, you could ask a question like, why do you want the orange? Right? Now, the reason we don't ask these questions is our assumptions. Our assumptions stand in our way. We sit back and go, oh, well, they want to eat it, so let's cut it in half and give it to them. Our assumptions can stand in the way not only of progress here, but also a satisfactory resolution. So don't let your assumptions stand in the way. What you want to do is go ahead and ask the question, why do you want this orange? One child's going to say, well, I want to eat it. The other child's going to say, well, I want the peel. Well, why? Another question. There's a number of ways we could ask this. What are you going to do if you don't get the orange? What happens if your brother gets all the orange? What impact is that going to have on you? Oh, I'm going to fail my science project. Whoa, science project. What does that mean? Tell me a little bit more. See, now you're getting information you hadn't heard before. Now we can go into need exploration, find out what the need is, and then do the problem solving. As long as that step is missing, we create a scenario where we could cause more problems than solutions. So the questions we ask become critically important. I need to ask questions that will explore and uncover need. What else is going on at this table? You're going to get positions versus interest. Now we're back to Fisher and Urey's book and getting to yes. These are technical terms for them. Positions are often belief-based in scope and past-oriented. All right? Positions are where people get stuck. For instance, the children with the orange. I want the orange. I want the orange. I want the orange. I want the orange. You're all familiar with that debate, I'm sure. If you have children, you've heard that one over some food item in the kitchen. They both want the orange. They're stuck in the position. What they want to see happen is I get the orange and you don't. That's their single-minded solution coming back in. Based upon the way they read the scenario, they read the resources, their conclusion is, I get the orange, you don't. So it's based in the past, in the way they understand the scenario, and it's belief-based. But interests, as Fisher and Urey identify them, are need-based, and they're future-oriented. So if we're going to look at need-based, that's where we want to head in terms of identifying and understanding interest. I can explore with the kids, well, what is it you are going to do? What's going to be the result? Where are you going to go with this once you get what you want, whether it's X, an orange, money, leave, promotion, whatever it is. What are you going to get? What's it going to mean if you get it? Those are the kind of questions we want to ask in order to uncover the needs, all right? And then keep it future-oriented. We're going to ask about behavior. What do you want to see happen tomorrow? For example, I can be sitting there as an employee talking to my supervisor on the other side of the table, and I can be asking for respect and dignity. How many times conflicts, I can't tell you the number of times I've sat at this table and the result was I want to be treated better. I want to be treated fairly. I want to be treated like everybody else, respect and dignity. But that's often vague. What does that mean in terms of concrete behavior? How are we going to describe that? Tell me what you want your supervisor to do tomorrow when he or she walks into the office that would communicate to you dignity and respect. So we're looking for future behavior, a future orientation that will meet the need that is identified here today, right now. So we're going to start talking about need exploration. Let's look at the characteristics of a need explorer. What does a need explorer do, and what do you need to be doing here at this table in order to uncover and identify needs? First characteristic, you want to work at identifying needs. Now, it's going to take some effort because our first instinct, again, is problem solving. We want to create a scenario or a situation where we're asking the questions and doing the work to identify needs. Now, don't get confused. Oftentimes, people at the table may use the word need in a sentence and not come anywhere near identifying what their need is. For example, I may be an employee, and I've received a suspension. And this suspension is unfair. I didn't deserve it. If you knew me personally, you would understand I'm a great employee, and it's got to be a jerk of a boss who would suspend me, right? Yeah, I thought you'd agree. My boss, on the other hand, sees a different scenario. He or she has given me this suspension because they feel I deserve it for whatever reason. So I'm sitting here looking in the past, thinking about this situation. No, I did everything that was right. No, I followed procedures and policy. I did not deserve that suspension. So what am I asking for? I'm asking for the suspension to be dropped. Now, if you turn to me and ask, well, tell me, Rick, what is it you need here today? I need the suspension to be dropped. Does that identify my need? Not necessarily. Don't be tricked by, just because they can use the word need in a sentence, that they understand their need. The other reason why this is a lot of work is because oftentimes the parties themselves aren't able to identify or articulate their need. That is your job. That's why a third-party neutral is required in a situation like this, or someone who has a resolution skill set can begin to do this to help people. All right? So it takes work. It takes effort. You want to be able to ask questions that will identify their need. The next characteristic we're going to talk about, steer away from the truth. Now, this is often a shocker for folks. What I'm not trying to do in this situation is investigate. As a conflict resolver or as a mediator, my goal here isn't necessarily to determine, did the supervisor do everything that was right? Did Rick do everything that was right? If I could determine what the truth was, then we would be able to move forward with a decision. Not necessarily. In fact, the truth rarely leads to resolution. I mean, think about it. Let's say we're sitting here at this table and we're talking about the supervisor, and out of a series of questions, you as the conflict resolver, you as the mediator, uncover the truth. What are you going to do with it? I mean, so you found out that maybe the supervisor didn't do everything that he or she was supposed to do. Aha, see, you messed up. You should have. You didn't. Now, what's the supervisor going to do? First thing they're going to do is become defensive. Now, do you think the supervisor is going to readily admit, or would they more likely start to lie about the circumstances and situation? Not only have you created an entrenched situation, but you've given this, even created the opportunity and supported the opportunity for this supervisor to restructure the events in a way that will protect him or her. So it's not often that the truth will gain you a resolution. So there are times where truth is important. There isn't time. There are investigators out there. There are EEO counselors. Their job is to investigate the past, is to determine and uncover the truth so that policies can be changed and people can be punished and things like that. That is not the role of a mediator here. We're not interested necessarily in the truth, and we're not going to stay in the past. We're interested in uncovering need and moving to the future. Okay? Next, let's look at the next characteristic. Creates multiple options. Remember that single solution mindset we were talking about? Let's work with Rick a little bit. Rick wants the suspension dropped, so we're going to explore with Rick some questions in order to identify need. If you ask me questions about, well, Rick, why do you want the suspension dropped? Well, I'm going to tell you it's not fair, right? It wasn't right to begin with. I want justice. Well, why do you think it wasn't fair, Rick? Well, because I did all the right things, right? Explain to me why you think it wasn't the right thing. You're asking me questions that's going to prompt me to give justifications for my position. You're going to get belief-based statements. If you ask why, explain to me, tell me why you think that it's wrong. I don't want positions. I need to get the person out of positions and into needs. So let's ask Rick an impact question. Rick, what impact will it have in your life if the suspension is not dropped? Let's ask that one. Or the other one. If it is dropped, what impact would it have? But let's stick with let's say it's not dropped. What impact is it going to have on your life, Rick, if the suspension is not dropped? Well, what am I going to say? As an employee, got a suspension, what kind of answers would you expect an employee to say? I'm probably either going to give you one of two responses. It's either going to be about money, I can't afford a suspension, or it's going to be about my file or my personnel records. It's going to be about my career track. One of those two things is the kind of impact the suspension would have on me. So now we're closer to need-based. Now think about this. So Rick, I understand that your need here, let's pick money. Your need here is money, and that the impact that the suspension is having on you is going to affect your wallet, the money. Yes, that's correct. Now, if the suspension is dropped, will that have any impact on the need for money? Yes, it will. But here's the next question. Is there anything else that could happen that could have an impact on the money? Yes, there are. There are other things, a number of things. What could be done that would impact money flow to Rick? Same thing with file. Will dropping the suspension have an impact on the career track? Yes. Is there anything else that could be done that would also have an impact on that career track? Yes. That's where we're focusing on multiple options. The person usually comes in a conflict situation with one solution in mind, and what they are thinking of is a result of how they've understood the past, what their beliefs, how they're organized, and so they offer this singular solution. By asking the questions about need, the need is money, and then raising questions about other ways to impact money, you've opened the door for multiple options. Now, notice, you started in a situation where the supervisor is saying, no, I'm not going to drop it, and the employee is demanding, drop it. So you've got drop it, no, drop it, no, drop it, no. There's not a whole lot for them to talk about. But the minute you identify need, the minute you discuss finances or file, you've opened the door for other ways of impacting that need. You've opened the door for conversation by creating multiple options. That's what we want to do. Okay? Now, the next characteristic, we're going to dig for detailed behavior. Tell me what this looks like. One of the questions is often overlooked. We've identified for Rick that his money is need. How much? How much money? Are we talking 3 days, 5 days, 7 days? How much money are we talking about? And Rick, does it have to be the whole amount? Are there ways to impact the way this money comes or goes? How many different ways can we adjust, or how many different behaviors could we have that impacts the filing? I mean the money. For instance, we could do the suspension without pay. The suspension could still stay, but the money would be impacted differently. We could do a suspension over the weekend. Rick could have overtime. Rick could get a performance award where the supervisor could write Rick a check. Rick could get another job. I mean, there's a number of ways in which the money could be impacted, and you've opened up those options. But until you dig for the details, tell me exactly what this looks like. What do you want to see happen? Does it have to be played out this way? Does it have to be played out that way? The more details you have, the more you have to play with in terms of your options, the more conversation these two will have. So you want to dig for detail. The next one, you need to extend the exploration to both parties. We've explored the need for Rick, the employee. And now we've turned around, we've discovered, well, it's either finances or file. And it could be both. But let's stick with finances for a while. Let's go to the other side of the table. All right? We need to talk to the supervisor now and do the exact same thing. Does the supervisor have any needs over here? Yes. Now, we ask the supervisor, why is it, I don't want to change your mind. I'm not trying to talk you into anything. If you want to not drop the suspension, that's fine. But I was just curious, right? We're headed for an impact question. What impact would it have on you as the supervisor if you dropped the suspension? Now, we're not going to ask the why. We're not going to head into, we're going to steer away from positions. We're going to go right to the need-based question. Talk to me about impact. What's the supervisor going to say? There's a couple of other possibilities. The impact could be how the supervisor gets looked at by the other employees. Or it could be how the supervisor is looked at by his or her bosses. So it could be both, or it could be one or the other. So let me see if I understand this correctly, and I'm asking the supervisor, you're concerned about how the other employees would react if they found out you dropped the suspension. Yes. Okay. Watch. If the suspension is dropped, will that have an impact on how the supervisor looks to other employees? Yes, it will. Is there anything else that could be done that would impact how the supervisor looks to the employees? Yes. Again, we're opening those doors to multiple options. What if it's the bosses? If dropping the suspension, will it have an impact on how this supervisor looks to the boss? Yes. Is there anything else that could be done that could have an impact on? Yes. So we want to begin to explore some of those things. Now, here's the interesting part. If the supervisor's need and concern is how he or she looks, is there anything Rick can do that would have an impact on his needs or her needs? Can Rick do something that could improve the way the supervisor looks to the employees? Is there anything Rick can do that could improve the way the supervisor looks to the bosses? See what we're beginning to do now? By identifying the need, we've created a negotiation space that Rick could contribute to what's best, the best interests of the supervisor. Now, what motivation would Rick have to do that? Unless Rick thinks that maybe the supervisor might do something to help impact Rick's need. Can the supervisor do anything to impact the finances for Rick? Yes. So now we've got the negotiation set up because we've extended it to both. And then the last characteristic we want to talk about is we're looking for shared interests. Is there anything over here that is identified as a need that the person on this side of the table could address? Is there anything over here in terms of need that the person on this side of the table can address? Now you've created the possibility of cooperation. Indeed, collaboration is what we talk about here. So Rick is going to be highly motivated to help meet the need of the supervisor, and the supervisor may be, again, highly motivated to meet the need for Rick. You've got collaboration taking place. Here's often what goes wrong. And I hesitate to address the wrong because a lot of times folks walk away with that part in their minds. This would be inappropriate. If I identify Rick's need as money, an inexperienced mediator or inappropriate conflict resolution technique would be to come immediately then to the supervisor and say, well, Rick needs money. What can you do? That's a mistake. All right, and it's going to cause problems here at this table. I don't need to find out what the problem is over here, what the need is, in order to come over here and ask for a solution. That drops me back into the problem-solving mode. I'm not completely finished with my need exploration if I begin to do that, and I damage not only potential here at this table, but I could equally damage the mediation program I'm working with. I got to tell you, when the energy that I end up expending here at this table with a employee or a supervisor, most of my energy and need exploration gets spent on the supervisor for this simple reason. Management comes to the table usually unprepared to think in a collaborative way and unwilling at that point to think in those terms, because they think in coming to the table, what they're being asked to do is admit I've done something wrong and compromise. Well, I'm not going to admit I did anything wrong. The suspension was fair. And certainly, what reason would I have to compromise? Unless out of the goodness of my heart. Now, I'm a great employee, and people would really enjoy doing nice things out of the goodness of my heart. But now I'm an employee who's filed an EEO against this supervisor. I've kind of hurt the goodwill. There's not a whole lot to motivate this supervisor to do something for me, unless we identify needs. That's where we need to be focusing on. So, good need explore has all of these characteristics, and I want to make sure it's critically important that you do it to both sides of the table in order for them to have those shared interests that they can work together on. It creates what we call the collaborative model, or the results we're talking about, collaborative model. Notice this. Remember, there's a lot more going on at this table than just resolution. My experience has been that in those programs that push their mediators to have high statistics for resolution ends up hurting the overall program. Now remember, in the communication segment, we talked about 93% of the communication was voice, tone, and body language. If you've got a mediator sitting at this table who is feeling the pressure to up their statistics for resolution, don't you think that that's going to come through in their voice tone and their body language? 93% of their communication? You better believe it is. These people are going to walk away from this table feeling pressured, and what you don't want to happen is them walking away going, you would not believe what that mediator wanted me to do. That will hurt a program. Not only will they be suspicious and uncomfortable with the process, they won't want to participate in the overall program. Those programs that free up the mediator to focus on the resolution process end up growing because the mediator isn't pressured, isn't invested in any of the solutions that are here, and they're free to do the need exploration. And like we said at the beginning, empower people to make an informed decision in their own best interest. So there's a lot more going on here. In other words, the benefits. Let's look at some of those benefits. Even if they don't resolve the conflict, there's benefits. It builds for the future. Do you think that in the midst of an EEO complaint, out of a collaborative model taking place at this table, that if Rick shares with the supervisor his needs, and the supervisor turns around and shares his or her needs with Rick, and they talk about the possible options of meeting those needs, do you think that would have an impact on their relationship? Do you think it would have an impact on their communication? Invariably it does. These people walk away from this table, even if they can't resolve it, different understanding about themselves, different understanding about the relationship, and certainly a different understanding about this process. So it builds for the future. They may not resolve it here. They may resolve it out in the hallway or a week later or some other time, but it has an impact on their future together. The next one. The second benefit of a collaborative model is that it creates movement even if there's no resolution. There's a lot more going on here than resolution, and we don't know. The conversation, the communication, when you get a supervisor and employee talking to each other about their needs, about what's going to help them and benefit, and they actually explore options and possibilities of mutually helping each other out, even if they don't reach a resolution, it has an impact on their relationship. It has an impact on the way they talk to each other outside of this table on the workplace floor. So it can create movement, whether there's a settlement here now or later. Rick may decide to drop the case because of something he's heard here. It might not go forward. All kinds of different things. You just don't know what's happening here. And the last one, values, relationship issues, as well as substantive issues. Problem-solving models, often in their efforts for speed and getting people back on the workplace floor, saving time, often focus too strongly on substantive issues. And oftentimes relationship issues can be overlooked. This collaborative model, of sitting here talking together about what's going to mutually benefit both actually can create those bridges, highlighting and valuing relationship issues. Let's look at your responsibility. Your responsibility here is simply integrity. Your role here isn't to solve their problem. Your role here isn't to fix it. Your role here isn't to make this go away. Your role here is to create an opportunity for these two people to resolve their own problem. In fact, the responsibility not to fix it, not to make it go away, actually lies on them because it is their conflict, it is their responsibility. This is a model that rather than telling people what to do, actually pushes the responsibility of them resolving their own conflict, or at least giving them the opportunity to resolve their own conflict. No, your responsibility has more to do with empowerment. You have created an atmosphere, you have followed a process here that creates the opportunity of empowering people to resolve their own conflict, to make an informed decision in their own best interest. And that own best interest comes about by you exploring the need, digging deeply for details, creating multiple options for them to address and talk about, and then giving them an opportunity to share that with each other as they talk together. Let's see how that would actually work out in practice.